Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Madness to Miracles radio show, a show brought to you by Odyssey House Incorporated. The Madness to Miracles radio show is about addiction and recovery, with the primary focus being on the recovery process. My name is Anisha Freeman, and I'm your host. I'm also known as the locksmith because I make keys for people who are locked up in their minds. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. And what that means is I have not used any drugs or alcohol in over 18 years. I'm also a therapist. I work at the Flint location of Odyssey House and the Saginaw location. I'm also the clinical director at the Saginaw branch. So I wear a lot of hats. Today, I'm acting as the radio host. Now, the Madness to Miracles radio show airs every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and 10:30 p.m. right here on WFOV 92.1 LPFM Flint. Our Voices Radio, determined to make a difference. Now, I don't know for how many of you are familiar with Odyssey House, so for those who may not know about us, Odyssey House is a residential, we have residential and outpatient treatment for people who struggle with substance use disorders. We also work with people who are co-occurring, who have substance use problems and mental health disorders. We have inpatient residential treatment centers in Flint and in Saginaw. The Flint location is co-ed, where we can take in men, women, we can even take in children, so we can take in a whole family. We take in pregnant, women, expecting mothers. The Saginaw location specializes in women only. So we will take in single women, women who are expecting, women who have their children, women who are fighting to get their children back. We also have recovery houses in each location. We have recovery houses in Flint, Saginaw, and Port Huron. So if you would like more information about our organization, if you know anyone who is struggling with addiction, if you know anyone who is struggling, who have families or family members or friends who are struggling, feel free to call us at our 24-hour crisis line. We can be reached at 810-238-0483. So the Madness to Miracles radio show is actually named after an annual event hosted by Odyssey House every September in celebration of National Recovery Month. Last September in 2018, Madness to Miracles was hosted in Saginaw on September the 12th. We had an awesome keynote speaker. We gave out awards and recognitions to people in recovery. We had entertainment. We had good food and lots of fun and fellowship. So we will be announcing our Madness to Miracles event that's going to happen in 2019. We will announce that once we have the date and location secured. For the Madness to Miracles show, radio show, we alternate between having a recovery-related topic and having a guest speaker. So I have a topic today. Due to the holidays, I didn't have a guest. I haven't had a guest in a few weeks. We will go back shortly to having guests who will share their recovery journey with us. But today we have a topic. The topic today is the role of boundaries in preventing relapse. So we're going to talk about how important it is for people to develop the skill of setting boundaries to protect themselves in their recovery. As I said before, I'm a therapist. And I'm going to talk about a individual session and group session that I do with a lot of my clients, where we focus on boundaries and we talk about how important those boundaries, learning to set boundaries, are for a person who wants to maintain their recovery. I have a handout here, and I have absolutely no idea why I keep saying today, so just ignore me. I have a handout here that was written by a lady. Her name is Natalie. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, so I'm going to spell it. It's Gahrmann. You can actually find this handout online. You can Google it. The title is Establishing Boundaries That Honor You. This is a phenomenal document that actually defines what a boundary is, what a boundary is not, how to set one, how to enforce one when it's violated, and she also gives you an exercise where you can practice listing boundaries. And I'm going to read a couple paragraphs, and then I'm going to talk about how important developing this skill is to prevent relapse. Now, setting boundaries is a skill, and like any new skill, when people are just learning it, they are novice, they will not be very good at it in the beginning. You would have to practice and practice and practice to become efficient and effective at setting boundaries. So the first paragraph from this handout says boundaries are imaginary lines that help you protect yourself both physically and emotionally. They keep others' actions and behaviors from hurting, distracting, annoying, or imposing on you. So what Natalie is saying is that when you feel hurt, distracted, annoyed, or imposed upon, there's a chance that you may need to set a boundary there. Now, I say there's a chance because I help people understand that as we're learning to change the way we think, as we're working on our thought process, sometimes we can feel hurt or distracted or annoyed, and it has nothing to do with the other person. Sometimes it has to do with our distorted thought process. So there is a way to help people differentiate between when they need to set a boundary and when they need to examine their own belief system to see if they're hurt simply because of the way they think. For example, some people have told me that they felt hurt or rejected because somebody didn't speak to them. They may have said good morning to that person and the person walked right by. Now, the person may not have heard them. The person may have been lost in their own thoughts. The person who didn't speak to them may have just gotten some very bad news that morning, and they are in their own mind and in their own world trying to process what's going on in their personal life. So sometimes we can feel hurt or annoyed simply because of the way we perceive situation and events. So people who know and they're honest that they need to do a lot of work on their thought process, whenever we read that sentence, we talk about how they can take some time, make sure it's not their distorted thought process that's causing them to feel hurt or annoyed or distracted or imposed upon before they say, well, I need to set a boundary there. But after they process it, after they work through it in their mind, if they feel they need to set a boundary, then they can proceed. So Miss Natalie goes on to say, boundaries are limits you set on how others can treat you or behave around you. People treat you as you allow them to. However, you can actually teach others how to treat you based on how strong or weak your boundaries are. That is so powerful. In another paragraph, she goes down, she says that setting strong boundaries will help you stand up for yourself. Stop agreeing to do things you really don't want to do and start feeling less guilty about putting your needs first. A lot of people who are in recovery, they're still working on their core issues. Now, I've done several radio shows where I talked about core issues, and some people define behaviors as core issues. Some people define the belief systems that generate the behaviors as the core issue. However you label them, a core issue, for example, people pleasing. That's a behavior, but there are beliefs that people struggle with that cause them to people please. So when I work with people and we're talking about boundaries, we also talk about core issues. What issues are making it hard for you to set boundaries? Because you can read this wonderful, powerful, very well-written handout about boundaries. You can actually do the exercise. She has a little exercise in here where she helps you practice how to set boundaries. You can do all of that, and you can still struggle with actually articulating the boundary when it's time to do it if you struggle with low self-esteem, people-pleasing, and other unaddressed core issues. So you may be saying, well, Anisha Freeman, what does that have to do with preventing relapse, your ability or inability to set boundaries? Well, I'm going to actually share with you the exercise that I do with my clients so you can see what it has to do with relapse. So in the handout by Miss Natalie, Establishing Boundaries That Honor You, the exercise she has after she teaches you what a boundary is and gives you the steps to setting them, she makes a suggestion that you write 3 sentences and then you complete each sentence by listing several boundaries. So the sentence that begins, the number 1 sentence is, people may no longer, and then you list some things that people may no longer do. In her handout, she recommends you list 12 things, but people get overwhelmed. So I say just list 5 things that people may no longer do to you. You know, practicing setting boundaries, writing out your boundaries. Then the next sentence is, I have a right to ask for. And so then I have my clients list 5 things they have a right to ask for. The third sentence is, to protect my time and energy, it's okay too. And then I have them list 5 things it's okay for them to do to protect their time and energy. So to make the point about how important this skill set is and what it has to do with preventing relapse is, after my clients write out their 5 boundaries for each sentence. So now they have a list of 15 boundaries. So what I do is I say, well, read those wonderful boundaries to me that you listed. So I'm going to give you an example of mine that I wrote. I did the exercise myself. I never ask a client to do any assignment or exercise that I'm not willing to do myself. So for people may no longer, I said, people may no longer talk to me disrespectfully. They may no longer impose on my time, and they may no longer bring up my past without my permission. Because as I said before, I'm a person in long-term recovery. Now, I waive my anonymity from time to time when I share my story publicly, but no one else has a right to make a decision on waiving my anonymity in a certain environment without my permission. And so I've had all of these things that I've listed, and that's only one, that's just 3 boundaries, right? I've struggled early in recovery with people violating those boundaries. But the reason they violated them is because I had not articulated they existed. Yep. See, remember what Natalie said in that first paragraph we read? She said boundaries are imaginary lines that help you protect yourself both physically and emotionally. So early in recovery, when I would allow people to talk to me disrespectfully, when I would allow people to impose on my time, when I would allow people to bring up my past without my permission, yep, I allowed them because I didn't set a boundary. I would experience some feelings. So what I do is I give my clients a list of feelings, a feelings list that have negative and positive feelings. And so I have them go down and circle how they would feel if 1 or 2 or 3 of those boundaries did not exist. So I would I would say, well, we're going to remove the boundary, impose on your time. We're just going to let people impose on your time with no consideration about what you have to do or what your schedule is like. They're just going to impose on you. So we're going to go down the list of negative feelings and circle how you will feel. Then we're going to allow people to bring up your past without your permission in mixed company at a social event. You know, you're just going to have somebody bring up your past, right? And so go down and circle all the feelings you would experience with somebody bringing up your past. Then we're going to remove the boundary of how people can talk to you. We're just going to let people talk to you disrespectfully. So go down the list and circle all the feelings that you believe you would experience if someone was talking to you in a disrespectful manner. And I'm going to tell you that just removing 2 or 3 of those boundaries, people have circled almost every feeling, every negative feeling on this list. So I'm going to read a few of them. They said they would feel indifferent, impatient, unimportant, self-conscious, provoked, dejected, unhappy, disappointed, inadequate, uncomfortable, confused, tense, alarmed, annoyed, resentful, bitter, frustrated, worn out, embarrassed, inhibited, apprehensive, vengeful, indignant, cynical, hurt, miserable, panicky, shocked, trapped, threatened, infuriated. Those are just a few examples of the feelings that my clients articulated to me that they would feel if only 2 or 3 of the boundaries were removed from their list of 15 boundaries. But see, when I asked them, I said, you know, those 15 boundaries that you put down on that list, how many of them have you articulated to people, and how many of them have you enforced when somebody violated them? And they would look me, most of my clients, not all of them, but the majority of my clients would look me dead in my face and say, Ms. Freeman, I don't articulate any of these boundaries to people. I just assume they should know that they're not supposed to treat people like that. I would just assume that they should know that. And so I said, well then, if you are experiencing this large number of negative feelings with 2 or 3 of the boundaries missing in action, how do you really feel with these 15? And like I said, Miss Natalie suggested that you write 12 under each sentence, but we only wrote 5, so we have 15. And there people are saying, well, I don't articulate or enforce any of these boundaries with people. So that's what it has to do with recovery. Like, it's hard to enjoy your recovery if you're feeling an enormous amount of negative feelings all day, every day. You're getting violated. People are talking to you disrespectfully. People are imposing on your time. I didn't even go down to the second one. So let's look at a couple boundaries I wrote under to protect my time and energy. So to protect my time and energy, it's okay to say no. It's okay to make a schedule and stick to it. It's okay to say, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And so a lot of people are saying, well, I struggle with saying no. So if you don't have the ability, if you don't give yourself, now this is a boundary you put with yourself. Yeah, some boundaries you're going to have to set with other people. You're going to always have to set boundaries with other people. But a lot of boundaries you have to set with yourself. So what I'm doing, I do another group where they actually write out boundaries that they need to set with themselves, and then they write out boundaries they need to set with other people. And we practice, we role play, because this is like a skill, and you're gonna be a novice. So I practice with them. And when they set the boundary with me, if somebody that imposes on their time, so they write out what they need to say to that person, and I'll play the person. I act as if we're doing role play. I act as if I'm the person that they need to set the boundary with. And the first time they set a boundary with me, I go straight off on them. I go all the way off on them, because I'm helping them understand that you can set a boundary with people, but you're powerless over their response to you or their reaction. You're powerless. You still have a right to set that boundary. And if they go off on you, if they snap on you, that's a sign, in most cases, that they have no intention of respecting that boundary. Now you have a decision to make. Am I going to interact with that person? Or if I have no choice, because sometimes you have no choice to interact with people because you may be related to them. They may be your children. You may work with them. You may have to go into certain environments where they're going to be at, because you have to go there to transact business or to take care of your needs. So you're going to have a way, and we talk about that. I don't assume people have the same skill set that I have, because it took time for me to learn how to set boundaries, and it took time for me to learn how to enforce them, and it took time for me to learn how to be okay with setting that boundary. I have a mentor. She helped me when I was going through those years of building my skill set of setting boundaries, because she had a black belt in setting boundaries. And I would have to call her sometimes before I set a boundary if it was a difficult boundary, and sometimes I would have to call her after I set it, because my unaddressed core issues, I was still working on those core issues, but they hadn't been addressed. Those core issues would tell me, you didn't have a right to set that boundary, take it back. Call them and tell them you're sorry. You told them no, call that person back and tell them you'll do it. So I would have to fight, and she would help me. She would help me fight through until it came to a point in time where she did not allow me to call her anymore because she knew that I had developed enough inward fortitude to set a boundary and be okay with protecting myself. And this is how she put it the last time. She let me do it for several years, but again, the times that I would call her became less and less as I became more skilled. But the last time I called her, after I had set a boundary with someone close to me, and I stood up for myself, and I actually ended a relationship because the person had violated the boundary repeatedly and didn't show any sign that they were going to stop violating the boundary. It was actually somebody bringing up my past and mixed company, and I finally ended the connection with the person. And then I had to enforce a consequence because I would still be around that person because we worked in the same industry. And what my mentor told me when I called her is, she said, Anisha, how long are you going to have to ask permission to protect yourself? And right then, I knew I was free. She freed me all the way. I didn't have to call her anymore. I called her about other issues, but I didn't call her and ask her permission and approval for setting a boundary to protect myself. And so boundaries are key. They are critical. Natalie, on this handout, Establishing Boundaries That Honor You, she said this is the #1 skill set that you need to develop that will determine the quality of your life. That's powerful. That's a powerful statement. She says, but it is the skill that most people have trouble using. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, they have trouble using that skill because of low self-esteem, people-pleasing, a sense of inferiority. Like you don't have a right to stand up for yourself. And so this is what I tell people, because a lot of my clients would be like, well, Ms. Freeman, I'm afraid to set the boundary because I'm afraid if I set the boundary, then they won't want to have anything to do with me. So this is what I tell them. I said, if you tell somebody they can no longer do ABC to you, and ABC is whatever they're doing that you want them to stop, and they disassociate with you, if they choose not to have anything else to do with you because you said they can no longer do ABC, you haven't lost anything. All you lost was somebody who was doing ABC to you. All you lost was someone who was assisting you. They didn't make you feel a certain way. The lack of boundary made you feel a certain way. But they were assisting you in feeling a wide range of negative feelings on a regular basis. And because you're in recovery, you're trying to manage all of those feelings without drugs or alcohol. And a lot of people relapse because they have not set boundaries. They're being constantly violated. Sometimes they're huge, overt violations. Sometimes they're covert, minor violations, but they're still causing them to feel negative, experience negative feelings all day, every day. It's hard to stay clean if you're feeling hurt, rejected, confused, annoyed, provoked, tired, useless, miserable, trapped, self-conscious, envious, rejected, disappointed, helpless, furious, abandoned, lonely, cynical. If you're feeling that all day, every day, because you have not set boundaries with people, how long are you going to be able to stay clean and sober? Because see, a lot of people ingest drugs and alcohol because it suppresses their core issues for short periods of time. Yeah, I've never met anyone who was drunk, who suffered with low self-esteem while they were drunk. I've never saw anyone in a full opioid nod struggling with people pleasing. So see, people use dope and alcohol to suppress their core issues for short increments of time. Once the issue is suppressed, they don't have a problem setting a boundary. I've never seen anybody under the influence of alcohol have a problem setting a boundary, telling you what you can and cannot do. They don't have a problem when they're drunk. And people say, well, it's liquid courage. No, it's liquid issue suppression. That's what it is. It suppresses. The courage was already there. It's just that the issue needed to be suppressed. And then with their natural courage comes up and they stand up for themselves. So yes, setting boundaries are very, very, very important. They're a very important skill set. And if you don't know how to set boundaries, find this handout online. I usually make most of my tools myself, but I use this tool by Natalie because this is phenomenal. She explains what a boundary is, what it isn't, how other people, you can expect other people to respond and react to you setting a boundary. She also tells you how to attach a consequence to it. If the person doesn't respect the boundary the first time, you reinforce it. She gives you strategies on and techniques on them. And like I said before, she has an exercise, a homework exercise where you could actually practice. So in order to enjoy recovery, I said enjoy recovery. Enjoy your life without drugs and alcohol. I'm not talking about hanging on by your fingernails. That's miserable. And a lot of people can't do it. Some people can do it. Some people can be miserable. They call it dry drunk. Some people can be miserable. They don't use the drugs and alcohol. In their life, the quality of your life will improve somewhat. You know, if you're not using drugs and alcohol, the quality of your life is instantly going to improve to a certain degree. But they're still not enjoying the full benefits of recovery because they have not addressed their core issues and they haven't developed certain skills like boundary setting. It's a very important skill, and you must develop it. So I believe we're running out of time for today's show. Like I said, if you or anyone you know needs help, you can feel free to call Odyssey House. We can be reached 24 hours a day at 810-238-0483. Again, that number is 810-238-0483. Thank you for joining us today on the Madness to Miracles radio show. This is Anisha Freeman, your host, giving you the keys you need for a wonderful life. I'll be back next week right here on WFOV 92.1 LPFM Flint, Our Voices Radio, determined to make a difference. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Hey Flint, did you know there's a medicine to treat a stroke if you get to the hospital as soon as the symptoms start? No? Then you're not alone. The people of Flint are joining together to become stroke ready. Stroke ready will help us recognize the signs of stroke by thinking fast and to get to the hospital right away for stroke treatment. Just listen.
Recognize the signs of a stroke. Think fast. Don't delay. Move right away. Think fast. Stay calm. Don't be alarmed. Think fast. If you know the facts,
grateful dawn.
Speech difficulty.
Is the speech learned or hard to understand?
And if you see any of these symptoms,
T.
this is what you do. Call 911. 911. Call 911. 911. Because
911 operator, what is your emergency?